We are recording.
Awesome. Good afternoon. My name is Randa Watts, and I am the Clean Water Organizer for Prairie Rivers Network, and I will be your moderator for today's exciting webinar. Today, we will be getting an insider's look at the solar development process. We'll hear best practices for community engagement from a developer and what benefits solar can provide from a community-based perspective, and a real-world community example of a solar project in El Dorado, Illinois. Illinois Extension co-sponsors this webinar, and I would like to thank our partners for all of their support. We are recording this webinar. You will get a link to the recording and contact information for the speakers in the next few days. And you can always find local government education webinars like this on the Illinois Extension YouTube channel or on Prairie Rivers YouTube channel. This is an overview of our agenda today. We will have three speakers. Each will present, and then we will take questions at the end of the presentations. If you do have questions in the meantime, feel free to put those in the chat, and we will share the questions with the speakers during the Q&A at the end of the session. Also, depending on the question, the speakers may answer it in the chat. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, who will share a developer's perspective on engaging with communities. Let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Danielle, if you want to share your screen, I'll go ahead and do your introduction. With more than a dozen years in the industry, Danielle Peoples, project director at Atwell Consulting, has a diverse range of leadership experiences, including strategic engagement, communications, change management processes, and crisis responses. As Associate Director, Danielle assists in cross-developmental collaboration as well as the implementation of stakeholder engagement strategies for power and energy clients and beyond. Danielle has a wealth of experience in the energy industry, particularly working with high-risk, high-visibility renewable infrastructure projects, including offshore wind and hydrogen. She is passionate about giving back to her community as well as participating in energy and leadership networks. Danielle, thank you for coming today. The screen is yours.
Thanks, Randa, and hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Danielle Peoples, and I lead our communications and stakeholder engagement at Atwell. So Atwell is a national consulting, engineering, and construction services firm. Most of my work focuses specifically on power and energy projects for a broad range of clients, and that includes utility scale solar development across the country and in Illinois specifically. So today I want to share how I think about community engagement and solar development, why it matters, how I support developers, and what I've learned from a few real world projects in Illinois and across the country. So why I care about this work, I really care about this work. Oh, let me back up. So why I care about this work. This work is important to me because solar projects don't happen in a vacuum. They happen in rural communities and rural places, and places that have land that carries history and identity and legacy. And for rural landowners, land isn't just acreage, it's representative of their family, of their heritage, the stewardship of the land. So I give a lot of thought into how we can pair rural energy in a way that feels respectful in rural America. It offers a chance for families to keep farming in some situations, to stay rooted in their land, and to diversify their income and prepare for the future. So energy projects all sit in somebody's community. People see it every day. They talk about it at church, at school events, and the coffee shop. And that means that trust matters deeply. For me, engagement is more than just getting the permit and the local approvals. It's about building relationships that are really grounded in respect. And sometimes it's the simplest things that can mean the most. I started saying this years ago. I started my career in a regulated utility company, and I would talk about the mama rule, which is just simply treat folks the way you would want somebody to treat your own mama. Tell her what's going to happen before it happens, what the plan is, If there's going to be changes, let her know in advance, and then clean up your mess and be appreciative at the end of it. So I say that to my project teams and teammates to keep ourselves grounded in how we can be respectful and treat community members like the important partners that they are. So, a bit about my approach and how I support developers. So, at Atwell, my role is to help connect developers with communities in a way that is clear, responsive, and hopefully authentic. And that begins with early engagement. The earlier developers begin, the more opportunities they have to identify concerns, to reduce risk, to avoid costly surprises. I've never heard someone say, "I wish that we had started engagement later," but I sure have heard the opposite sentiment when things get dicey. So there's a framework that we use to engage communities that helps to balance both developers' goals and community expectations. And it's really three key points: building reputation through proactive communication, reducing risk by addressing concerns before they escalate, and then connecting community opportunities. And I think we're going to have some great examples of that later on. Things like jobs, tax revenue for specific stakeholders, some neat partnership opportunities. And one of my favorite things to see happen in community engagement is when there's an idea or perhaps a risk that a community member brings up that the project team, the developer, would not have known otherwise without having those good conversations. And sometimes it's a little domino effect of conversations. Somebody suggests, "Oh, you should talk to so and so. They've got good experience," or "This person remembers what happened during the major flooding event." That could be helpful for how you lay out your project. So, engaging communities not only is a nice thing to do, but it can also lead to really helpful insights for the project overall. All right. And then another thing that I would like to point out is the importance of follow through. So, early engagement certainly builds trust. But then when we get into construction and operations, that's the test to that trust, the opportunity to do what we said we were going to do. So I feel like I've seen projects where communities certainly watch closely to see if the commitments that were made by developers during permitting are honored. And that's a chance for developers to prove that they meant what they said in the development and permitting phase of the project. And the reality is, construction often brings changes, timelines shift, design details evolve, equipment might get delayed. There is certainly going to be some change in what the plan and the schedule is. And if it's communicated early and transparently, I feel like communities are pretty understanding of that if they feel like they're part of the information flow of what's going on and can understand what those challenges are. Usually there's a lot of appreciation for a little proactive explanation. So the follow through to me is not optional. That's the difference between a community that feels respected and one that feels like they've been misled. And then let's see here. I have a couple of calm stories from the front porch to give a little bit of life to what I'm describing here. So on a project that we worked on with a community, we had the opportunity to choose a name. And that may seem like a simple thing, but when coming into a place, and if it's a place that the developer hasn't worked or had a presence, it can be an opportunity to create a really nice, respectful connection to the place. So in this particular project, we visited the local historical society and their museum to learn about a landmark that we were really interested in. We had maps that were pulled to see how the spelling of that landmark had changed over the decades. And with the input and guidance from the very kind people who were volunteering at the Historical Society, we selected a name with the right spelling. And it was a simple thing for us to do, but it helped build pride and ownership in the project. On another project in Illinois, the site was in county jurisdiction, but pretty close to a small village. So we got to know the village president and the American Legion leadership nearby before the project went into county permitting. And by showing up at their events and supporting local activities like their very beloved hometown baseball team, we were able to have nice conversations, to build trust, to answer questions. And that community too, we ended up asking for feedback about hosting a community open house before the permit proceedings took place. And the community seemed very interested in that and even guided us to a local caterer who is very rooted in that community, and having her hash brown bake earned us some major street cred. And then being able to support places like local print shops for our needs for that community open house, little things like that can mean a lot to show that we took our time to get to know the community and ask folks for what would be meaningful to them. So these front porch moments are where relationships are built in a very authentic and human way. And in rural communities, renewable energy, I think, can be seen as a complement to traditional land use. Solar can coexist with grazing or agriculture. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can stabilize family income. It can help if there are gaps in local budgets, supporting schools and fire departments and libraries. And solar projects too have the benefit of not overwhelming a community with additional infrastructure needs, like some large investments might. So when it's done right, I think it's a really nice fit to pair solar projects with rural communities across Illinois. All right, and then I will end with one final thought here. So, solar development is not just a technical process, but it's a human process. It's more than the permits and the panels and the power. It's really about the trust and the transparency and the follow through. And communities will remember not just that a project was built, but how it was built and whether the developer lived up to their word and what they had committed to doing on the front end of the project. So when engagement is early and thoughtful and respectful, it reduces risk for developers, it creates opportunity for communities, and hopefully builds a lasting foundation of trust for the operation of the project. And in Illinois, where solar is rapidly growing, every project is not just about the clean energy there with that particular project. It's really helping to shape how people view the industry now and into the future. So thank you so much for letting me share these reflections. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the discussion here today.
Yeah, thank you, Danielle. And I love what you said. Community connections can provide a lot of insight that you can't get anywhere else and potentially save you money in the long run because, locals know their place best. So I love that. All right, and on to our second speaker, who will discuss community benefits, Wade Halva. Danielle, there we go. Okay. Wade Halva, Southern Illinois Outreach Coordinator with Faith in Place, works with communities downstate to have the information they need to make informed decisions about solar. Prior to this role, Wade served as the pastor at First Presbyterian Church at Marion, Illinois. Wade holds a Master's of Arts in Christian Education from Union Presbyterian Seminary and a Master of Divinity in Theology and Religious Vocations from Columbia Theological Seminary, and a Bachelor of Arts in History and Religious Studies from the College of Wooster. Wade, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Randa. I'm kind of the odd duck. This is not obviously my first career path. Um, but now I work for Faith in Place. We work with houses of worship and faith communities across Indiana, Illinois, and Wisconsin on all sorts of issues around environmental justice. And in my part of the state, far downstate, there's a lot of discussions around utility scale solar. I have had the privilege of 20 years in communities of between 350 and 18,000 people. And so I know a lot of places and a lot of back roads and a lot of people who aren't necessarily the people you'd think are in charge in a community, but have been around since dirt and those sorts of things. So I'm also on a community impact advisory board, which is part of where my specialty for this conversation comes in. So often when folks think about utility scale solar, they're thinking just about the energy production. And that's really just a tiny, tiny slice of what utility scale solar can bring to a community. It's going to bring energy production, which long term should bring costs down. If, like me, you're in Ameren territory, I have several friends and organizations whose bills went up 70, 80, 100, 120% in the last month. So cheaper energy production is of interest. Also, there's significant local tax base investment. Um, the project I'm working with in El Dorado that we'll hear more about is bringing $42 million of tax impact over 20 years, 23 million to the schools. I don't have anybody else coming to bring that sort of investment in small town rural America right now. On top of that, land lease payments to landowners are really significant. I'll get into that a little bit more. Community impact and benefits can be really, really significant. And one of the things that we often don't think about is the long-term nature of these relationships. Danielle is hitting it on the head that, we think about these projects and kind of like they're built and they're done, but that's not the entirety of it. People are going to drive by these fields for 20, 25, 30 years. Um, all these sorts of things that are going to accumulate. If we only think about them during the building process, then we miss the real impact they can have and the real presence they can have in some of our communities. Um, in much the same way that the old Walmart building, or if you're in a town that's been around long enough, the other old Walmart building can be used as a landmark 40 years down the line. The solar fields may be used as landmarks or turning points or history points in a community. Um, so the clean energy production can lower costs. We've lost a lot of tax base over the years in rural communities and small communities. This can be funding restored to schools, libraries, fire districts. Income taxes can go up due to the land lease payments. A successful project can open doors, and I didn't put it on this slide, but an unsuccessful project can close doors. So, when you have a group that's doing well at their community engagement, their community benefits, that's transparent, quick to communicate, all of those sorts of things, people like that. They may not be 110% on board with the project from the start, but they at least like knowing what's going on. Um, if the developer is not any of those things, it'll leave a bad taste in the mouth. If people don't get what they're expecting, if it's hard to get a hold of somebody, all of those sorts of things. And so those can go in both directions. We have seen, particularly here in downstate, when coal-fired power plants close, a community can lose up to a third of its tax base. We saw that in Grand Tower when that power plant closed. And so this is an opportunity to restore some tax base so that things can keep on operating in our communities. Financially, this comes from the Farm Bureau. They put out a report last year. Nationwide average cash rental rate for non-irrigated cropland is $146 an acre a year. The farmers they surveyed last year, most of them were offered a rate of over $1,000 an acre a year, or $1,500 an acre a year. Take some of the uncertainty out of things to sign a contract like that versus leasing land differently every year and things like that. So this can be a stabilizing factor in our communities income wise that we don't always think about. I know that a lot of my folks think about the big farmers, 3,000, 4,000 8,000, 10,000, 14,000, 15,000 acres. We have a lot of legacy farmers too who have held on to 40 or 80 acres because they can't sell grandpa's farm. They just can't do it. Emotionally, it would kill them to lose that tie to the land. But this gives another pathway for them to utilize that land and benefit their families. Community benefits or community impacts, we use both sets of language, so I left both of them in here. They can be scaled over longer time frames to make real change. If you're part of a community organization that relies on grants, as I am, you know that a lot of grants are one and done. They don't want to support it past the time frame of the grant, and they certainly don't want to pay operating costs or overhead. Well, then how do you maintain the project you started with 1 year's worth of funding and still do what you did? And so community impacts and benefits that persist for the life of a solar project can really make some changes because you can build on things. Imagine a 5, a 10, a 15-year, a 20-year benefits revenue stream that could build, that could make changes as the community changes in response to the first 2 years of benefits and impacts and things like that. And those benefits plans can be structured in ways unique to the communities in question. As Danielle highlighted, like a lot of our solar projects are going to be in county space, not in incorporated village or town or city space. And so, spreading those benefits out throughout the county, throughout the communities in the county, throughout the school districts, those sorts of things gives you some really unique flexibility to meet the needs of a specific community where that project is. And I think that's one of the neatest things. All of our rural communities are not the same. They're not all going to be the same. All of our small communities are not going to be the same. And so the things that are valued or needed or expressed as needed is going to change in each of those communities. That sustained economic impact can really transform a community. That's money. And money is nice. I like money. I have 2 kids in college this year. I really like money and wish I had more that was not going to the college. But more importantly, I think those sorts of investments in our community can really start to change the narrative about some of our communities. We're used to talking about decline in population, in number of kids at the schools, in number of jobs, talking about the increase in the number of houses that aren't kept up, or the number of vacant lots, or the number of vacant buildings. We're used to thinking that our best days are behind us. And sometimes, like simply a group coming in to say, we see something here that is a positive that maybe you haven't thought of this way, can inject some real life and imagination and hope into the community. I'm pretty sure Cody's gonna talk more about some of this, so I'm trying not to step on his toes too much for his part of the presentation. Multi-use of the land really excites people and swings the opinion. Talking about agrivoltaics, where the land is used to either grow crops or grazing or something like that, that changes, at least has changed in my experience, some attitudes of people, that it's not being taken out of agricultural use, but it's remaining in agricultural use. So they see their heritage respected on the land, and it does something else. The idea that it's not just a field of solar panels, but it's still something else. It's still pollinators. It's still land restoration. It's still all of these things. And we often don't think about that. We think it's just, a big field of panels similar to what our neighbor has in their yard. And you can't do that for 2,600 acres. It doesn't work. It's hard to scale and imagine. There are negatives. I mean, and some people don't like the looks of solar fields. There are concerns about taking land out of agricultural use. A lot of people want to know how the developers are making their money. Down here, I've had a ton of solar developers come door knocking for residential, and people know people who've been taken advantage of in that side of the market, and they wonder about their community being taken advantage of the same way. And it's not just a solar problem. It has been a problem for years. Our economic model of development in small communities has been to beg companies to come and to give them tax abatements and incentives and all these things. And now the model has switched where we have what they want. We have land with irradiance that's open, that's accessible, that's able to be connected to the transmission lines. And there's some swaps there that can take place in the mentality of community leaders and need to. That we're not begging for something to come. We're ready for it to come. We have what's needed and we're ready to be partners, but we don't need to be begging all the time. There's also a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding about solar, and that circulates, and it's tough to address, like any kind of misinformation is, but you sort of have to try a little bit. I've heard solar panels leak. There's no liquid in solar panels to leak. Those sorts of things. People get worried about things, and that's where the transparency Danielle talked about is really important. Being able to have those conversations out in the open, candid, address concerns head on, is really significant. This is my contact info. I know that Randa will send it out. I think the biggest thing that some of these projects give, particularly when it comes to community impacts and benefits, is it forces our communities who've been functioning out of a scarcity model. We don't have enough. We're not going to get enough. More is never going to come. To think about what we would do if we had more. And if we had more for more than once, to build off of something for our schools, for our kids' future, for the oldest in our community. We're all aware post-COVID of how important social interaction is. We've realized how many of those spaces don't exist in the same way. And so it enables communities to have conversations about how they get better instead of looking at inevitable decline. And I think that's a real gift. Thank you.
Thank you, Wade. I loved how you talked about the impact 10 and 15 years down the road. Like, yeah, that's beautiful. Really looking at how we can improve things in the long term. Okay, so our third speaker will share his experience facilitating a solar project in El Dorado that worked with local schools. Cody Cusick, if you want to go ahead and share your slides, if you got them, I'll go ahead and go into your intro, is serving as the interim superintendent of El Dorado Community Unit School District Number 4 and is the principal of El Dorado High School in El Dorado, Illinois. He has been instrumental in transforming El Dorado High School into a college and career-ready campus, spearheading hands-on learning initiatives, and expanding dual credit college course opportunities for students. He facilitated many local connections as the El Dorado Solar Project built out its community benefits with local partners and schools. Cody, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much. I've also got with me Rocky James and Jan Rash, our two members here from our city government as well. Just kind of talk about the overall impact and we've been able to work with on a solar project here. Just some background, as you guys kind of talked about there is, these El Dorado High School is in a low poverty area in terms of, we do have 70% of our students that are free reduced lunch and that we are, higher in the state average on that. Our city's poverty rate is slightly higher than the overall county with an estimated about 21%. So there's kind of the background of El Dorado High School and geared towards how much of an impact a solar field, solar project can have on not just the school, but the community in itself. We have been very blessed to be able to work with a phenomenal company that is putting in the solar fields just north of our town. It is a very large project. It's a 270 gigawatt project. They are megawatt project they're putting in just north of town. And as Wade said, it is a major blessing for our school in terms of our overall, EAV impact. For the school alone, it is looking at around that $20 million of additional tax revenue over the course of that 20 years for the school. And that is money that we'll be able to use to be able to fund teacher recruitment, be able to fund initiatives and projects for our students to become not only college ready, but career ready in our area. And we know that trades is a very important area and it is something that is very close to my mission and vision for our school, is finding ways to engage those students who otherwise maybe not have that correct avenue that's for them. And so an impact in finding it a partner, and if you're working with schools along those lines, to be able to make that impact, not just on the EAV financial side, but being able to find a company that's invested in the school and community as well. Solar is, building up our electrical grid and energy to help future-proof, as well as making those investments in our students to be able to future-proof our students as well, to be able to meet the growing job demands of the market. It is something we heavily look at, like I said, in our internal and external meetings that we have with community partners and local businesses, of what kind of trades do we need to target and work on in getting our students those impacts. So with that, there is, we know Elderville High School is very cutting edge on trying to work on the college and career ready pathways for our students. We really work hard to find those niches for our students. We're excited about having one of the only HVAC programs in Southern Illinois that offers HVAC credit for our students while still in high school. And then we also have certified nursing, because our second largest industry is medical in our area, as well as expanding into education and welding. And we've got lots of opportunities for our students to be able to graduate high school with having a full-blown welding certificate one semester after high school. These things are made possible by leveraging the money that comes in through the EAV and through taxing, through property taxes for our school. So it's been very impactful. Kind of as Wade said, if you look at where we're at here in this area, we had a big coal mine boom. We had lots of population in those areas, and those have now since left. But when the coal mine shut down, the jobs left, and when the jobs left, the people left. And so what it left with, it was our schools were seeing decline in enrollment. And a project to this magnitude is a major financial boost for our area, not just only for our school, but for any of those taxing bodies that those solar panels are located in. So it has a major impact on our budgets and our future planning for what kind of programs and services we can offer for our students. So it's not something that is just purely looking at on the budgetary side of making our budgets, a little less tight in this economy, but it allows us to be able to expand and use the additional income to be able to meet the needs of your students where they're at, and to be able to find those unique avenues that otherwise you wouldn't be able to do without the additional funding and initiatives that are out there. I hope that as industries go in and make these investments in Illinois and throughout and build solar panels, or if they're building the community, the solar projects out there, that they're looking at how can they also give back to the area they're serving. And we're very blessed with a phenomenal corporation that is working with us hand in hand and realizing a lot of our vision and our mission, and making investments in our youth through their community impact programs. All this kind of ties into what our vision is at the high school, and in that our vision 2030 is leading towards where we want our students to be in 2030, and finding different ways and different avenues. And that's made possible by various different ways. And we're excited that we're soon to be able to announce some major details that are coming through our program that we've got there. But kind of going on our Vision 2030 is our program that we are soon to announce is basically we're going to be able to provide some hands-on learning, job skills, healthy meals, and community engagement all through one project. And this is, again, something that's funded through a community impact program that we're going to be able to work hand in hand, but be able to provide job skills for our students. So the goal of that, like I said, is to be able to use different ways of funding, not just from any kind of support grants and impact grants, but also the availability of the additional funds that come into a school system to be able to grow various programs that you currently have. Like we want to, what we call is, breaking that cycle and breaking that generational poverty, and finding ways for our students to be able to engage outside of high school and be able to find something for them to do. Maybe they're not college bound, but how can we get you career ready? Let's find you a career or something like that. So that is the major impact it has on the school side is a project, or these solar fields, they're to say there was not, negativity to begin with is an understatement. There was a lot of people who were kind of resistant to a project to this size, but early on you can see the benefits that exist there. And I do think highlighting those so people don't just see, a field full of solar panels. You can see that as it's a field full of opportunities for our students and our school to be able to find ways to be able to engage our students, which is okay, our taxpayers within the district, and be able to provide programming for them that's relevant and rigorous, to be able to engage them in new ways, to be able to help them be college ready. We look at what our, when we poll our students and our families and we ask them, what do you want when they graduate high school? But none of them are saying I need to know the quadratic formula, or I need to know how to, do this. They want, job skills. They want to be able to know how to change a tire, change their oil and stuff like that. So these kind of programs and this kind of funding and this kind of impact of having something at this level come in, for us, it's a major ordeal. Obviously, it's the $20 million over 20 years is a big funding impact for us to be able to continue to provide these niche programs of college and career readiness, where, we might have class sizes that are more individualized, one-on-one, to be able to provide, sustainability in our lower grade levels, to be able to provide that one-on-one, to be able to get kids on a reading level by third grade. And so those are some of the major impacts that you just don't see whenever you see a field full of solar panels. It is literally it's a field full of opportunity for younger kids in the school district, in our system, and to be able to provide that impact for years to come. Because what we invest in our kindergartners and young kids now, we won't see that pay off for 12 to 15 years, but that's the opportunities these things are kind of providing. And so we're excited about working with such an amazing community partner that we have, but like to be able to just continue to, highlight the program and the benefit that it has for a school system is quite a bit in terms of just overall budget, overall sustainability of programs, and to be able to meet those needs. Because as the jobs and the coal mines are shut down, there was nothing replacing those. And then you have these fields here, and there are some that, say, okay, well, I don't want to fill with solar panels and stuff like that. You've got to highlight the good, and you've got to highlight, okay, things have changed and gone differently. I'm sure that, back when coal mines and stuff like that were coming in our area, there was people who probably didn't want to see a coal mine built in their backyard, or didn't want to see, strip mining occur in their back landscape. This is just another progression of opportunities for us, for our students, for our town. It increased, like I said, lots of things that can go on for the different townships and stuff like that to be able to provide opportunities for growth within our community. So we're excited about it, and I hope that anyone else, if you ever want any information at all, don't hesitate to ever reach out. And like I said, I'll be glad that I'll be able to talk or help however I can, or give a good word on that, because it is such a phenomenal impact for us, not just on our EAV side, but also to be able to work with a company that wants to, invest in our schools, invest in our community, and see everyone continue to be better. Yeah. I think that's the end of mine.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, 20 million over 20 years is transformational. And I love how you said that you were making your local grid more resilient while also building resilient futures for your students. Like, that's very powerful. I love that. And I actually got to tour the area whenever we were down in Southern Illinois, and seeing your guys' vision 2030. It's great to see it.
We are very excited about it.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm super excited about this project also. Okay, well, thank you to all of our speakers. We'll go ahead and enter into the Q&A session. So if anybody has any questions, I have not seen any in the chat. So if you want to put them in the chat, feel free to, or if you want to come off mute, by all means. We might have just done such a good, oh, Sally, there we go. Sally, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Randa. I'm curious from Cody. Sorry, my camera is being weird these days. I'm curious from Cody what resistance they experienced as they were trying to get this project off the ground. What, if any, resistance they experienced?
there was definitely resistance from, landowners that weren't maybe a part of the original, like, they've got a home out there and they didn't want to see a field of solar panels out their front door, their back door. A lot of just in terms of resistance, they were going out about the sustainability of the program. They didn't think solar was something that was going to last. They thought they were going to be able to, a field full of broken glass after maybe a hailstorm or something like that. There was environmental concerns. I know they went to a lot of county boards in terms of like the setback and how far they have to be back from individual landowners' homes and stuff like that. So that's a lot of it that they had to fight on that end, was just the overall perception of they didn't want solar panels in their backyard. Are they safe to be around? Is it fine for our kids to play in the backyard with them around? What's the recycle plan look like if these are, when these expire, things like that. And that's the things that the company did. I thought did a really good job trying to answer those up front. Outside of that, it was a lot of, on the township side, it was a lot of road use issues and working with the road commissioners and stuff like that and getting roads restored back to their original or better conditions of where they were after the company had left. And because, there's a lot of traffic and, we are in a very rural town of 4,000 people. And there's more traffic on these roads than ever before whenever they were installing these here. So there was a big concern in terms of that side of things that the community had on that. And, they, just like even like the teachers and all that stuff there, that we say the 20 million over 20 years, they're very skeptical. They want to, they want to be, they're ones I want to see it to believe it. So it's one of those that, for us, it kicks in next fiscal year, just the way the property tax system works, is when that, starts having a financial impact to us at the district level. But before that, like I said, we've got a great community partner that we're going to be able to kind of jumpstart that a little earlier, and we're excited to soon be able to announce the full details of that plan. But that was the big pushback, was, giving up the farmland. It was fighting that the farmers who, didn't want to see their traditional farmland go away and become solar panels.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Cody. We have a couple of questions. I'm going to go ahead and read Dan Woods. Unless you want to come off mute, by all means, interrupt me. But he asked, what issues or concerns are there with the high transmission power lines? This might be a good question for Danielle. It seems a little technical, but anybody's more than welcome to answer.
Yeah, I'm happy to share some quick thoughts and then hand it off to others. So with high voltage transmission lines, these crisscross all across the country. It's how we move energy from generation sources to where it's actually used, to our homes, to our businesses, to our industries. And so there are plenty of federal and state level regulations to make sure that the voltage is transported in a safe way, and a lot of studies that have been done to ensure that human impact is taken into account. So there's no inherent risk with living near a transmission line. The thing from a community engagement perspective that gets really nuanced is it's a new visual that most people probably aren't going to raise their hands to say, yes, I'll take a transmission tower in my backyard. And because transmission lines, similar to, I guess, pipeline, they're linear projects, they're going to cross and impact a lot more properties and a lot more property owners. So again, another example where early engagement before plans are finalized, before engineering sketches are locked in, to get feedback and input, and to understand if there are some options or some considerations that are important to the community. Transmission line siting is a very challenging thing. It's how we're all sitting here on our computers or laptops or phones, though. So it's critical to how we live our day-to-day life. Infrastructure is a tricky thing when it feels like, we're asking for some individuals to take more of the impact or more of the burden than others. And so I think engaging people early before there's a plan being formalized and proposed is the best way to do it.
Thanks, Danielle. Okay, Lee Klein asked, she said, I am a member of a county board working with land use and zoning. My question is about how to force, quotation, these companies to engage with community benefit programs when we are essentially bound by Illinois law to permit these projects so long as they meet the WEC rules put into law in 2023? This sounds like a citing question. I'm not sure if Wade, you feel comfortable answering it. I know this is a struggle for a lot of communities.
I mean, it is a huge struggle for communities. We have some counties in Illinois that have battled this, not from the side of like wanting community benefits, but from the side of not wanting solar by making the permitting costs so high that nobody wants to put up with it. I think the main thing is to understand that like this is going to be a long-term relationship, and starting that conversation off early, not partway through the process and things. And I think you need to be able to have the conversation about what it could transform in your community. It needs not to come across as, well, how much money are you going to give us? And more, this is a project that is looking forward for the country's energy usage. We want it to be looking forward for our county as well. How can we make that work? A lot of it depends on who the project's being built for, who the off-takers are, power. Like there's a lot of layers. But start early in that conversation, I think, is the best way. And probably have some sense of your county board and what they think before you start the conversation. There's nothing worse than negotiating with 6 people at the table and realizing you've got 10 different opinions just on your side of the table. So that's what I would say.
And Miranda,
Okay.
if I can add a quick thought
Yeah.
on that one too. I think sharing hopes and expectations with developers as they're coming in and introducing the project is very appropriate. Most, if not all, of the developers that I work with want to be good community partners and want to find meaningful, creative ways to give back to the community. Sometimes it can be challenging to get responses from local stakeholders in the beginning. If you're a developer, you're trying to get the lay of the land, you've done some research, you're trying to make connections. I find that I often have to be very politely persistent to request people's time. So I do think, engaging early and saying what you want and what's on your mind, a developer would appreciate knowing what are the priorities in the community, and they can read your master plan or they can read your budget for the upcoming fiscal year, but tell them, make it clear.
Thanks, Danielle. I'm going to jump to Anna's. She said, was sustainability, we kind of answered this, but if anyone wants to touch on it again, was sustainability and clean energy being turned political? Did you experience pushback, and how did you change that narrative or change people's minds? I think, Cody, you mentioned that it was mostly people seeing the financial impacts, but if anybody has any other answer to that.
I apologize. My mic was cutting out here.
I know part of that conversation from Cody's end is that the El Dorado project has been in development for almost 10 years now, Rocky and Jan, right? I mean, it's been a while. And the persistence of the developer in staying in renting space locally and paying like kind of city rates versus small town rates for some of the space they rented, and being a presence in that way, built the relationship. I think the other piece that didn't show up so much until like we started talking about it is that we have a small family-owned electrical business in the region who has gotten heavily into solar. And so people seeing their kids, their neighbors, family members, go into solar and seeing those benefits locally on that smaller scale, I think really did change some of the conversations. Because that's what people can wrap their heads around. It's really hard to wrap your head around a 2,600 acre solar field. It just doesn't work.
Yes.
So, Cody.
Perfect. And while we got Cody unmuted. I'm going to go on to the next question. They said, as Wade mentioned, solar fields go into the county space, not the municipal space. Susan is curious to hear from the El Dorado city officials, so Rocky, as to what they view as the future benefits that the city of El Dorado expects to see from the project beyond the impacts to the schools.
Well, it has impacted us with, there was initially several jobs that came to the area, which brings money to our area, that's Fenton area. And like Wade said, when they first came, they rented space off of our Main Street committee that was actually taking money out of their own pockets just to keep the building open. And so I talked to the solar people and asked them to rent space from them. And they gave them a pretty good sizable amount of money a month to rent that space, and it's really helped them make it, and keep that building open. And then there's, a few permanent jobs out there, and then the benefits of the school, Cody and I talk a lot about that, and Jan, our finance commissioner, what it's done for our community as far as our kids. And the most important thing about a community is the kids. If you help the kids, get them going and try to keep them at home, it just brings a lot of programs to our schools and puts us up on the top. When before we just didn't have the resources. It's just it's a blessing for us. And, the other money they're putting into the community, which will be down the road, that's just amazing to us. And it's, some people still can't believe it. And, like I say, it was negative at first. You don't hardly hear anything about it now. And something else Wade hit on, D&D Electric, which actually renovated an old building in El Dorado and moved in beside us. And, it's been a blessing for El Dorado too. And like Wade said, that's really, really calmed it down because people saw a smaller scale solar outfit. And they put in, just in my area alone, I bought solar from my mom, my niece, my neighbor. I mean, we've all got solar now, and it's just really, caught on fire from there. And it's been a blessing for our community.
I've seen that. Sorry, go ahead. I interrupted.
Go ahead, Jay.
One thing I was going to say is when Cody was talking about what we see, as I drive to church every Sunday and different times through the week, I see the solar field. And that's what I see is exactly what he says. That's opportunity for us, because like with Cody and what the school has to offer, we have buildings downtown that need revitalized. We have a lot of things that we can do, and we can use what Cody's talking about, these kids at school. And down the road, what they're going to be able to do with this is they're going to have the skills to come in and help us when we're revitalizing some of these things. So that's really important. So we see it as partnering, all of us partnering together, which I think is really important to be able to do the things that we'd like to do for our community, for our county, for all of it. That we see it as opportunity, and we're very, very glad to have it there, to have it with us.
Yeah, that was beautiful, Dan. I know Cody had said it too, but the field of opportunities, I'm going to have to keep that one written down for sure. Okay, we have a couple more questions, and then I'm going to jump to Sherelle. Sorry if I said that wrong. So the next question we have is, what are the strategies put in place to prevent rivalry between the initiative and agriculture as the concerns to the use of farmland? Has anybody had any pushback from farmers, I assume?
Well, there's a weird conversation going on because a lot of the people who are concerned about it are not the landowners. So we get a conversation about people who are driving by our corn and soybean fields and think, oh, we're losing food. Well, no, we're losing ethanol and biodiesel production. And so some of it is you push back by saying, is that your decision to make? Rural America often has a really strong understanding of landowner rights and who gets to decide what they do. I think one of the other things is that you have the conversation about agrivoltaics. So this El Dorado field is going to be the state's largest agrivoltaics install. It's going to grow a perennial grain called Kernza. One of their other sites is going to do some grazing. And like seeing that it's not either or, it can be both and often provides the way forward. We're very used to a binary situation. You can have this or you can have that. And sometimes we can have both. And so inviting people to think about the ways that we get both or what it could mean is really helpful. The El Dorado project has also got some of its buffer space, and some of the space on the field is going to be able to be used by the local 4-H for agriculture and local food insecurity groups for agriculture and food systems work. And that changes again the attitude, because again, then it's staying agricultural. It's not completely moving out. And that's been really important to people.
Wade, one other thing I've seen, and you've probably seen it too, is that for generational farmland, sometimes it can feel daunting for a younger generation to decide if they want to keep in the family tradition of farming the land, and to have the financial security blanket of lease terms that maybe don't take up the entire property, allow there to still be farming, but it doesn't feel as risky to maybe younger generations to come back home and farm and keep that tradition if they've also got a known annual income to supplement that.
Yeah, I have also recently got to tour some agrivoltaics, and it's also one of my favorite projects to see come out. Okay, one more question, and then Sherelle, it will be your turn. This one is from Carrie. Was there any federal tax credits taken advantage of through direct pay, and was there selling of SRECs? Cody, that might be your question.
That's probably not Cody's question. It's probably mine or Danielle's.
Sorry.
In this
ahead.
specific context, they probably did not use the traditional tax credits that you would be thinking about for business because of the scale. Instead of the investment tax credit, it's probably the production tax credit because it's a different scale. In this case, the solar company retains ownership, so direct pay doesn't apply. They're a for-profit company. So they'd be able to keep that. And I am not sure if they sold the SRECs or not. They built this field with a power purchase agreement with a corporate partner. The corporate partner has the solar company have the community benefits built into the base understanding of the compensation of the contract. So every megawatt of solar produced puts X amount of dollars in the community impact fund, and then that goes out. But it's not, if there's extra, it's just a baseline understanding. And so, on this scale, it's just really different. This field's, I think, 250 megawatts AC. It's big versus like what most of us would be thinking about for a community or a single building or organization. Danielle, on your side, how does it work?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on the developer and, what their financial backing is. There's certainly been production tax credits that have been able to be applied for utility scale projects across Illinois. The interconnection agreement is an important step in the development phase to make sure there's an off-taker. When I think about the local permitting piece, there's so many things that have to click into place before a developer is ready to submit that conditional use permit or a special use permit. They've invested a lot of time and money to get to that point. So that process and negotiation of what goes into, I think somebody mentioned conditions in one of their questions. Conditions are a great spot to negotiate, but it shouldn't be the first time that the conversations are taking place to explore what things could have better clarity for the developer, because developers like clarity and certainty, and then what things would be meaningful to the community. So conditions as the formal tool, but good old conversations in the early days go a long ways.
Thank you for answering that one. We got 1 minute left. So Cheryl, if you want to come off mute and ask your question, I see your hands raised.
Yes, Sherelle, thank you. And this was a really wonderful presentation. I'm not downstate, I'm in Chicago, but I'm always wondering because we have a lot of solar companies that are interested in doing, I'm putting in air quotes, community solar, but it's not in the community. It's usually in one of your neighborhoods, in one of your communities. And then they're farming or bringing the what's left over back up to the city. My quick questions are, have you, probably more so for Danielle, since you are the big company here, in terms of panels, like upgrading of panels and that process and the wattage of the panels, have that conversation kind of been, is that a part of your kind of community engagement, like when there's an upgrade needed for the panels and when that happens? And then the next piece would be, are there like battery storage locations to allow for there to be some of the resilient grid, to be, transferred to another community, even another part of the state?
Sherelle, I think let me check and see if I understand your questions. I think you're asking about when a developer, an owner operator would want to upgrade or upfit their equipment and how that's communicated to the community.
Yes.
Is that fair? Okay. The industry likes to use the term repower, but it's essentially when maybe the solar panel technology that was selected has reached a maturity, or there's such better technology that it would make sense for them to go in and do an upgrade of that solar panel technology because they're going to get more output. That is a very technology specific conversation, but we've seen that in projects that were built in maybe the early, like 2007, 2008 timeframe, that repowers, replacing some of those panels makes sense now. And some of those leases were probably 20, 30-year leases. So that's a time for conversation with the landowners too, when there's lease renewals, to say, does the developer have the financial backing and incentive to continue operating this facility? And are the landowners interested in continuing to lease their land for this use? So we're just kind of getting at the point where those earliest projects are reaching the end of their initial lease periods. So I think it'll be an interesting one to watch. But certainly I would advise clients that if they're going to go out there and replace equipment, replace panels, it would be more than ideal to let people know in advance before they see activity and wonder what's going on. Again, to keep that, hopefully the good trust that was set up at the beginning of the project and the operations of the project for years, to keep that going. And then Sherelle, you were asking about battery storage, and I am seeing more and more developers want to include battery storage with their utility scale solar projects, because again, it creates more flexibility if energy is not needed at a given time on the grid, but it can be stored for a few hours and used when people are coming home from work, you're cooking dinner, you're using hot water. To be able to have the capability to dispatch energy onto the grid on demand and to put the solar energy into reserves is making a lot of sense. So I am seeing that more and more with projects, a solar plus battery storage proposal.
Thank you so much for that. And one small quick follow-up question for all three. Cody and Wade both shared that there were smaller local projects that were happening in terms of solar that kind of made it more accessible for people to see and make a large, huge 2,600 acres not too much for them to be able to consume, but they can see, oh, so-and-so's business has that. How has Atwell and then just other or your larger projects informed the increase of more solar panels for people's homes or smaller businesses locally? And how are you, or are you a part of the community engagement process of helping to kind of, since the bigger project now is, well, let's make sure our home is even more resilient even further, so we can, not have to be on grid at all. But so have you seen that where there's an uptick in individual homes and businesses increasing having solar because of your larger projects? And because of that, are you engaged with those local companies and helping to have streamlined communications and the through lines between the larger projects and even the smaller home and business projects? Anyone can answer that. I'm not putting you on the hot seat there. They're like, not me.
Oh,
Trill, most of the projects I work on are utility scale, so I welcome if Wade or Cody have thoughts here.
Yeah, I mean, some of it honestly is just familiarity. There's a lot of people and a lot of communities who are interested but don't want to be first and have to learn all the mistakes themselves. But like once you know somebody, once you've seen it go up, once it's been around. So in Carbondale, one of the car dealerships went solar 5, 6, 7 years ago. I've got churches that went solar in 2018. And so I can refer one to another for that. And I can tell you that like when my ministerial alliance is seeing our electric bill go from $900 to $2,500 due to the AMR rate hike, when they talk to the folks at the church who aren't paying an electric bill due to their solar, they suddenly get very, very interested. But it's because of a real person connection. It's not because of like advertising about solar and things. It's because of a person to commerce person, an organization to organization sort of connection. I want to go back to your previous question, Sherelle, just for a second. In Illinois, community solar is capped at 5 megawatts. So those fields are a lot smaller than what we're talking about here. And they could be done in more urban areas. We've got several in Granite City and Alton and places like that in downstate. But also those fields have to stay inside of a utility territory. So the fields that are serving Chicago are probably in Northwest Illinois, still in that ComEd, PJM area. The southern 2/3 of the state is all Ameren. And so the fields down here feed into the Ameren and the MISO part of the grid. So there's a little bit of that difference. And right now, we're taking all the power we can get from anywhere we can get it, because down here at least it's supposed to be 101 today, and everybody's air conditioning is going to be running great guns. So there's no worry about storing it for tonight. We're all spending it this afternoon when it's hot.
Thank you. And Cody, if you had anything in regards to.
Honestly, it's about the same thing. It's not one advertising the other, but it does, I think, just kind of open people's perception and changing those kind of like the hearts and minds to it. And I think that goes hand in hand with that community engagement side, because it is much easier. I think whenever you're saying, okay, hey, we're going to fund this major project, or this project is brought to you by, or, majorly supported by the company that is, putting those solar panels in. So they see that real impact, because there's a lot of our community are used to those brick and mortar stores. And what you see is, you see the name of D&D Electric, or the name of Big John's, or the name of your local, small business on the back of, your kids' little league teams, or sponsoring things like that. And then to be able to have the impact partner of a company that is, putting those large fields in, also supporting the schools, the community, they see that name out there, it gets them that name recognition as well. And they see that, okay, this is a legitimate business. Then it's also here to not just, sell power and not be a community partner, to be around. And that leads itself into making solar more known and having a lesser negative impact on people. I'm a fan of it. I've got it in my house. I'm thankful for it, because power bills have been outrageous here the last, as hot as it has. It's nice and warm today. But I think just that, as Wade said, it's that recognition factor of it having it out there and changing the mindset of what solar panels are.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not going to hold on to you guys any longer. It is almost 10 after the hour. I just wanted to thank Danielle and Wade and Cody, Rock and Jan. Thank you for being on here. I will send out, well, we will send out the slides and then also a link to the recording. We will also share everyone's contact information. So if you have separate questions, feel free to reach out. And then I will go ahead and put a link to our next webinar in the chat. If anyone's interested, we'll be talking about grid resiliency. So thanks for sharing your lunch with us, and everyone have a great day.
Have a good day.